All right, so we have another non-scandal scandal involving America's dad, Bernie Sanders. Mainstream media outlets are pumping this out as much as possible to try to be like, gotcha. This is going to make people dislike you, right? Does this make people dislike Bernie more? Let's run it 24/7. So it was a question about the border, and then he responded in a very measured, reasonable way with a straightforward position that I think it's hard to find fault with, but nonetheless, they are trying to make it seem like this is a big deal and there's going to be a backlash to it. Not so sure about that. Take a look.
If you were to have open borders in our society today, how would you deal with the social services connected with opening the borders, such as healthcare, medical care, and
who do you think is suggesting opening the borders?
Well, that you're an activist for opening for.
No, I'm not. I'm afraid you may be getting your information wrong. That is not my view.
Okay, I apologize. Thank you. Okay.
I think what we need is comprehensive immigration reform. That is not simply. You're quite right. If your point is you open the borders, my God, you know, there's a lot of poverty in this world, and you're going to have people from all over the world. And I don't think that's something that we can do at this point. Can't do it. So that is not my position.
Wow. Oh, my God. What an unreasonable position. So let me explain to you what they're trying to do. They're trying to take this clip, pump it out in mainstream media outlets, and then what they're trying to do is make Bernie Sanders' base abandon him, his most ardent supporters, because they're trying to say, oh, you guys support open borders. He doesn't support open borders. Got him. That's what this is. That's what this is. That's why this particular story, this particular clip is blowing up, and they're pumping it out on purpose. Now, what's the reality of the situation? There isn't a single, not a single politician in this country at the national level who supports open borders. In fact, this is an argument that the far right strawmans the left and says, all these lefties are for open borders. Well, we're not for open borders. And they do that because they know it's an easy argument that they'd win 10 out of 10 times if indeed people on the left were supporting open borders. But they don't. So they argue that the left does, so they can turn around and go, see, we're the reasonable ones. We now strawman the opposition to say they support something that they don't support, and now we're going to fucking, high step into the end zone here, acting like we nailed it. But again, the entire conversation is ludicrous because there's not a single national politician in this country, no matter how far left you go, that supports open borders. In my experience, you know who I've come across that supports open borders? More libertarians than anything else. Because libertarians really have like a principled stance against the government. They want to decentralize everything as much as humanly possible. And they think that it's beneficial for the economy if you have totally open borders where you can have goods and services go across borders, and you can have labor go across borders, and it's overall a net positive for the economy if you don't have what they view as an arbitrary restriction of these, arbitrary lines separating one place from another place. There are way more libertarians, traditional libertarians, American-style libertarians, who support that. In my experience, that's what I've seen. Now, are there perhaps some people who are not at all involved in politics officially, who are not politicians, on the left, who support no borders or open borders? I'm sure there are, but they're not nearly as many as these guys are pretending that they are, and they have absolutely no power. And I'm sure most of them, even if you drill down, they'll say, well, yeah, but that has to come in tandem with a bunch of overarching giant economic reforms in this country and domestic reforms in this country, because if you do it now, it's totally nonsensical. Listen, borders, they're not inherently racist or bigoted or bad or wrong, okay? I mean, really, when it comes down to it, in the current state of affairs around the world when it comes to politics, borders are necessary just for organization's sake. Because if you don't have borders, but you believe in democratic representation, as we all do, or we're all supposed to, well, then the only other option is there's no borders, and we believe in democratic representation, so yeah, we would need like a one-world government type system where we all make these decisions. And we don't have that. And if you ask people, left and right, the overwhelming majority will say, we don't want that. That is far too centralized of a system. It should be more decentralized, which is why having nation states is, honestly, it makes sense from a left-wing perspective. It makes sense simply from a practical perspective and an organizational perspective. But that's the thing is, okay, so now what I'm forced to do is come out here and make these very basic arguments that I think most of you just kind of know without me even having to make them on some core level, you know. But I have to come out here and say it because apparently the interpretation of the establishment is that, like, everybody on the left is foaming at the mouth and saying, let's get rid of all borders, when we're not saying that. And they assume that, like, we're going to be upset when Bernie Sanders says this, when the overwhelming majority of us are not. By the way, you know what the polling is on this? I hope you're sitting down. If you're part of the tiny percentage of people that doesn't support any borders at all, I hope you're sitting down. 80% of the American people are against open borders. Wow, what a shock. Like, that's actually not shocking at all. Nobody should be shocked by that, because that's like, duh. It's one of the things you go, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But 80%, man. So you're gonna, this is like they did with the reparations question. They're like, aha, Bernie doesn't support direct reparations. Well, first of all, none of the other candidates do either. None of them support it. And second of all, that's actually the overwhelmingly popular position. So there's no gotcha there. Same thing with borders. Aha, Bernie doesn't support open borders. So congratulations, Bernie. You have 80% of the country on your side. Now, but they're even more with Bernie Sanders. Why? Because 80% of the country is against open borders or no borders, but 75% of the country says immigration is a net positive thing. So some people might say, oh, there's a contradiction there. No, there's not. There's no contradiction at all. There's no contradiction at all. What they're saying is, yeah, I'm not against all borders. What I'm in favor of is having borders, but having an open-minded, tolerant, leftist approach for dealing with people coming in the country. And by the way, I polled this on the Secular Talk Twitter, a couple months ago, and the reaction was exactly the same. The thing that won in an overwhelming fashion was having borders, but having like an open-minded, tolerant approach to dealing with the flow of people. So, in other words, treat immigrants right, have a process to get people in the country, don't have strict, insane, arbitrary rules, and be a tolerant society, an open society, a fair society. But yes, of course you can have borders. Like every other fucking country on the planet has borders. That's not inherently bigoted or racist or wrong or bad. So it's just, I find it kind of incredible that, I'm telling you, man, conventional wisdom is a son of a bitch. Because some idiot strategist somewhere makes up what they think the reality is, and then everybody in Washington, D.C. runs with it and acts like it's true. And they really think this is a gotcha against Bernie. Gotcha! You're not in favor of totally opening the borders. Don't you hate them, progressive base? No. Not at all. Not even in the slightest. I'm not... Because what are they going to try to do now? I guarantee you what they're going to try to do is conflate Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump and say, aha! Basically the same person, see? This guy is an asshole who wants to separate families, break them up, allow ICE to have literal private prison slavery that they're engaged in right this second. He wants to totally shut down the border. He wants to deport everybody who's an undocumented immigrant. He wants a total and complete shutdown of Muslims. And that guy is the exact same as this guy who's tolerant, open-minded, and pro-immigrant, but he's also in favor of having basic borders because duh. But that's now the same thing because Bernie's not in favor of open borders. Gotcha. Okay. All right, if you say so. Understand, Bernie is 100% repping the complete and utter popular position in this country. And that position is 80% are against open borders or no borders, okay? 80% are against that. But 75% still say immigration is a positive thing. That is exactly Bernie Sanders' position. Against open borders or no borders. So it's fine to secure the border and fine to have borders for organization's sake, if nothing else. But yeah, immigration is net a good thing for the country. and it's a net positive, and we should welcome immigrants and be tolerant and open-minded and open-hearted. So it frustrates me that the establishment media and the far right strawmans the left and Bernie's base, and then they run with it. And most of us are over here like, this isn't a gotcha. And then there's going to be like a tiny fringe who feed right into that stereotype. And by the way, the trick will be, what the establishment will do and what the far right will do, is they will seize on that tiny percent that's like, yes, Bernie is wrong, I want no borders at all. And then they'll further hammer them and continue to insist that that tiny fringe represents the rest of the left. And then that will make the left unappealing to many people who would otherwise totally agree with what we're talking about. Because if they really think like, oh, the left, I guess, is for no borders or open borders, if they really think that, then yeah, that's going to help the right. If they really believe that that's what the left-wing position is. But thankfully, it's not. The polls show overwhelmingly they're for having borders, but also for an open-minded, tolerant approach in dealing with the flow of people. So this isn't a gotcha, but they're going to keep insisting it's a gotcha. And I mean, I just hope people don't fall for the trick. I really hope people don't fall for the trick. But I have to say, they're being clever, man. They're being crafty. Like, corporate media knows the flaws in the game. They know the flaws in the game. And so what was the last one they hit him on? Reparations. Because they're trying to say, how could any black folks on the left support Bernie? He's an old white guy, and he's not even for reparations. Meanwhile, again, every candidate is not for it, and that is also the popular position. They don't tell you that part. In fact, they insist other candidates or imply other candidates are for it, but it's a divide and conquer strategy. Don't look at this furthest left, most anti-establishment candidate who do the best things for everybody in the country. Don't look at him because he's not for reparations. Shouldn't you want him to be for that? Please attack him for that. And now they're doing that same trick on another perceived weakness of the left, which is borders. And they're trying to get the infighting happening, and they're trying to make this backfire on Bernie. It's all tripwires, man. There are tripwires all over the place when it comes to this election. And I said it once, I'll say it again. This is what's going to happen. And it's going to continue to happen. Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, and even Elizabeth Warren, those four are going to continue to be the four that get almost no positive media coverage. Almost none. And then meanwhile, all the other candidates, kid gloves all day long. Buttigieg is nonstop with fawning articles. They haven't stopped since he burst onto the scene, and the establishment thought, hey, he'll probably play ball. So nonstop fawning coverage. You're going to see the same for Kamala. You're going to see the same for Cory Booker, even though he's flailing miserably in the polls. And look for it. You'll see it. It's not that hard to see. It's really not that hard to see. A lot of when it's positive stories, what you'll notice is they try to fluff up the personal angle. Because you can't write an article about a corporate Democrat and say, look how wonderful they are on these policies, because they're not. So what do? You fluff up the personal angle. You talk about, they went to, like they're doing with Buttigieg now. He went to an Ivy League school, and he's a Rhodes Scholar. Yeah, he has an amazing personal story. I don't say so myself. And it's like, well, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I don't care if you worked at an Arby's. If you're fighting for the right policies, then I'm with you. There's an inherent elitism to the mainstream media, and it's insufferable. And that's why the actual populist candidates, and even just the semi-populist candidates like Elizabeth Warren, they're going to get destroyed. And the press is going to put them through the ringer. So it's up to us to fight back. And that's what we're doing here.